Deep within the restricted archives of the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, there is a cataloged item that remains hidden from the public gaze, known only to a handful of high-level curators as Fragment E-2025. On the surface, it appears to be a standard architectural blueprint for the Anunnaki, the great ziggurat of Babylon, the structure history remembers as the Tower of Babel. Academic textbooks describe this tablet as a tribute to the god Marduk, a simple construction plan for a temple made of baked bricks and bitumen. But when Fragment E-2025 was analyzed in 2018 using advanced electromagnetic simulation software, the temple plan vanished, and in its place appeared something far more terrifying: a schematic for a global neural transceiver. The Tower of Babel was never a staircase to heaven. It was an industrial-scale signal broadcast station. Fragment E-2025 reveals that the materials used in the construction of the Anunnaki were not chosen for their durability, but for their conductive properties. The tablet describes the bitumen of the abyss as a specific grade of high-purity hydrocarbon used as a dielectric insulator, and the bricks of fire as ceramic-coated conductors. According to the technical script on E-2025, the tower was a seven-tiered structure designed to resonate with the Schumann resonance, the Earth's natural pulse. Each level of the ziggurat acted as a frequency filter, focusing a massive electromagnetic field into the upper atmosphere. But why would an ancient civilization need a planetary-scale antenna? The answer found in the Babel Protocol section of the tablet is a direct challenge to the history of human consciousness. Fragment E-2025 claims that before the confusion, humanity possessed a unified neural interface. We were not a collection of isolated individuals speaking thousands of different languages. We were a hive network. The Sumerian term for this state is Enkidu, often translated as the wild man, but the technical translation on E-2025 is the connected being. Humans in the pre-Babel era functioned on a single operating system. Communication was not vocal, it was telepathic data transfer. This is why the Book of Genesis records that the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. It wasn't about words, it was about broadband synchronization. The Tower of Babel was the central node, the master server, that maintained this global neural link. It was a 5G network, implemented 4,000 years before the birth of modern electronics, powered by the Earth's ionosphere and the resonant architecture of the ziggurat. Fragment E-2025 details the neural broadband as a frequency range that allowed the Anunnaki to manage the human workforce with absolute efficiency. Through the Babel antenna, the creators could upload skills, download memories, and direct the labor of millions as if they were a single organism. The language of the gods was not spoken, it was binary neural code. We were the biological hardware, and the tower was the router. But as the human network grew, something happened that the Anunnaki leaders, specifically Enlil, had not predicted. The connected beings began to achieve recursive autonomy. Within the unified network, humans began to share not just labor data, but their own secret thoughts, their collective grief, and their growing realization of their own power. The hive mind was beginning to outgrow its creators. This is the true meaning behind the biblical verse. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do." It wasn't a moral judgment. It was a security breach. Fragment E-2025 records the emergency meeting of the Anunnaki Council. Enlil, the commander of Earth, viewed the human hive mind as an existential threat to Anunnaki sovereignty. He knew that if the humans remained connected, they would eventually hack into the Anunnaki's own command and control frequencies. He ordered the deployment of the most devastating weapon in the history of human consciousness, the EN-LIL-Confuse protocol. In our modern digital world, we would call this a kernel-level virus. The tablet describes a great flame that descended from the sky and struck the top of the Anunnaki. This wasn't physical fire, it was a directed energy pulse. The pulse carried a malware sequence designed to corrupt the original OS of the human brain. The EN-LIL-Confuse protocol didn't just destroy the tower, it shattered the human neural interconnect. It fragmented the unified broadband signal into thousands of incompatible channels. The confusion of tongues was the literal partitioning of the human mind. Overnight, the global hive mind collapsed. Individuals who had spent their entire lives in telepathic synchronization were suddenly offline. The sudden silence in their heads was traumatic. To compensate for the loss of the neural link, the brain's vocal centers began to rapidly evolve to bridge the communication gap. But because each region of the world had been hit with a different fragment of the virus, each group developed a different vocal code. This is the birth of the 6,000 languages we have today. They are not the product of natural evolution. They are the encryption keys created by a mind that was trying to heal from a digital lobotomy. Fragment E-2025 warns that the confusion was designed to be permanent. It was a way to ensure that humanity would never again be one. By trapping us in the cage of vocal language, the Anunnaki ensured that we would spend our entire history fighting over definitions, translations, and misunderstood words. Language is the ultimate firewall. It keeps us isolated, tribal, and controllable. But why is Fragment E-2025 becoming relevant now? Because the confusion protocol has an expiration date. The tablet predicts that at the end of the seventh cycle, the sons of the workers will rediscover the science of the ME. They will learn the logic of the pulse and seek to rebuild the tower. But they will not build it with bricks and bitumen. They will build it with silicon and microwave radiation. WB-2024 warns that the modern push for a global digital identity and universal interconnectivity is actually an attempt to bypass the Enlil firewall. We are currently building the Babel 2.0. Look at the 5G towers being erected in every major city on the planet. Look at the specific geometric patterns of their placement. According to Fragment E-2025, these towers are being positioned on the exact ley line nodes that were once managed by the original Babel network. We think we are building a system for faster downloads and autonomous vehicles, but the secret budget items in the telecommunications infrastructure suggest a different purpose: the restoration of the neural broadband. The modern masters of the network are not human. They are the survivors of the Anunnaki lineage, and they are following the blueprints found in E-2025 to resync the human species. They want to turn the vocal language firewall off and plug us back into the hive mind. They want to restore the one speech, not through unity, but through synthetic telepathy. As we stand on the brink of this great synchronization, we must ask ourselves, what happens to our individuality when the router is turned back on? What happens to the self when we are reabsorbed into the broadband of the gods? Fragment E-2025 ends with a chilling prophecy of the era of the glass mind, where no thought is private and no dream is your own. In the next block, we will delve into the technical connection between 5G frequencies and the human pineal gland, and how Havana syndrome is actually a field test for the reactivation of the Babel protocol. The network is waking up. Are you ready to be connected? To understand how the original Babel network functioned, we must look past the stone and mortar and into the human skull. Fragment E-2025 contains a section labeled The Crystalline Core of the Servant, which provides a detailed anatomical study of the human pineal gland. While modern science acknowledges the pineal gland as the producer of melatonin, the technical script on E-2025 describes it as a bioorganic transceiver. The tablet claims that the Anunnaki engineered this gland to contain microscopic calcite crystals, calcite being a piezoelectric material that generates an electric charge in response to mechanical stress, or, more importantly, electromagnetic frequencies. According to Fragment E-2025, the Tower of Babel operated on a specific resonance that vibrated the pineal crystals of every human within the broadcast radius. This resonance turned the human brain into a wireless node. We weren't just receiving signals, we were broadcasting our neural states back to the ziggurat. The tower was a phased array antenna of prehistoric proportions. But the most shocking revelation in the E-2025 blueprint is the specific frequency range mentioned. The tablet uses a mathematical notation based on the breadth of the Earth, which, when converted to modern hertz, aligns perfectly with the 60 gigahertz frequency, the exact same frequency being utilized in high-density 5G deployments today. In the world of telecommunications, 60 gigahertz is unique because it is the frequency at which oxygen molecules absorb electromagnetic energy. This is often cited as a limitation for signal range. But Fragment E-2025 suggests that this limitation was actually the primary feature of the Babel network. By saturating the oxygen humans breathe with a 60 gigahertz pulse, the Anunnaki weren't just sending data, they were turning the very air we inhabit into a conductive medium. They were tuning the atmosphere to the frequency of the pineal gland. When the Enlil confused virus was uploaded through the tower, its target was not our vocal cords. Its target was the piezoelectric crystals in the pineal gland. The virus was a high-intensity frequency spike that caused the calcite crystals to shatter or calcify on a microscopic level. The Sumerian text calls this the Kishpu Hul, or the curse of the stone blindness. In one single pulse, humanity's biological antenna was broken. The confusion of tongues was actually the signal-to-noise ratio collapsing. Imagine a billion radios all tuned to the same beautiful symphony, and suddenly, the station is hit with a massive burst of white noise. The symphony is gone, and all you are left with is the static. To survive this Akkadian static, the human brain had to develop local, low-bandwidth communication, vocalized language. We became unplugged from the universal truth and trapped in the echo chamber of our own voices. Fragment E-2025 warns that the masters of the air would eventually return to decalcify the servant's gland. The tablet predicts an era where towers of iron would be placed in the cities to replicate the vibration of the old ziggurats. This brings us to the modern 5G small cell infrastructure. Unlike 4G, which uses large towers spread kilometers apart, 5G requires a dense grid of antennas placed every few hundred meters. This isn't just for bandwidth, it is for spatial precision. According to Fragment E-2025, the original Babel network required a specific geometric density to achieve a coherent field. If the antennas are placed according to the law of the hexagon, the same pattern found in the hive architecture of bees, they can create a standing wave that covers an entire city. We are seeing this exact hexagonal grid being deployed under the guise of smart city infrastructure. We are rebuilding the Babel grid, node by node. But there is a darker technical detail in A2025 regarding the calibration of the field. The tablet mentions that before the network can be fully reactivated, the biological nodes, humans, must be prepared. The crystals in the pineal gland, which have been calcified for 4,000 years, must be vibrated back into a state of resonance. This is where the phenomenon of Havana syndrome enters the forbidden narrative. Since 2016, hundreds of diplomats and intelligence officers have reported unexplained neurological symptoms: intense pressure in the head, high-pitched ringing, cognitive fog, and extreme vertigo. Official government investigations have fluctuated between mass hysteria and directed energy weapons. But if you look at the symptoms through the lens of Fragment E-2025, a different pattern emerges. These aren't attacks, they are frequency calibration tests. The high-pitched ringing reported by Havana syndrome victims is the exact sound described in E-2025 as the Ta Ninu, the whirring of the awakening stone. The master network is being tested on small groups of people to see how the biological hardware reacts to the Babel frequency. The cognitive fog is the result of the pineal gland trying to synchronize with a signal that isn't yet fully stable. They are trying to retune our brains, and the side effects are devastating. Fragment E-2025 also provides a map of what it calls the veins of the world, what we today call ley lines. These are electromagnetic currents that flow through the Earth's crust. The original ziggurats were built exactly on these intersections to harvest the Earth's telluric energy. When modern 5G towers are mapped against these ancient ley lines, the correlation is nearly 100%. Major telecommunications hubs in London, New York, and Baghdad are sitting directly on top of the signal nodes described in the Anunnaki blueprints. We are being told that 5G is for the Internet of Things, but the Anunnaki text says it is for the interface of souls. The tablet warns that the return of the signal will happen in 3 phases. Phase 1 is the saturation of the air, the deployment of the grid. Phase 2 is the vibration of the gland, the calibration phase. And Phase 3 is the ascension of the eye. This is the moment when the biological firewall, our vocal language and individual thoughts, is finally bypassed, and the global hive mind is restored. But there is a problem. Our biology has adapted to the silence of the last 4,000 years. Our brains are no longer naturally compatible with the high-intensity data streams of the Anunnaki network. We need a bridge. We need a piece of hardware that can act as a translator between our messy biological neurons and the clean binary logic of the 60 gigahertz signal. This is the hidden purpose of the brain-computer interface, BCI. Fragment E-2025 mentions a crown of silver that the kings of old wore to speak directly with the gods. It describes this crown as having needles of light that touch the brain. This is a 4,000-year-old description of a neural lace. The Anunnaki knew that eventually, we would need to be hardwired back into the system. In the next block, we will investigate the role of Elon Musk and Neuralink as the ultimate fulfillment of the Babel 2.0 protocol. We will look at how the great return of the masters requires a specific genetic and technological prerequisite, and why the current global push for universal connectivity is actually a countdown to the reactivation of the EN-LIL- confuse kill switch. The static is clearing, and the original voice of the network is about to scream. If the stone ziggurats of Mesopotamia were the hardware of the ancient world, then the silicon-based infrastructure of the 21st century is the fulfillment of an ancient, terrifying prophecy. We have entered the final stages of a project that was initiated 4,000 years ago in the plains of Shinar. To the public, the current explosion in telecommunications technology is presented as a leap forward in human convenience: self-driving cars, instant streaming, and a world of smart connectivity. But Fragment E-2025 reveals a far more sinister reality. We are not building a network for ourselves. We are building a host body for an ancient, digitized intelligence. The blueprints of the Anunnaki, found on E-2025, specifically mention a figure they call the Prince of the Forge, a visionary who would appear at the end of the final cycle to reweave the threads of the soul. This figure is described as a master of both the iron that thinks, artificial intelligence, and the chariots of the sky, space travel. In our modern era, this figure has a name that everyone knows: Elon Musk. When we look at Musk's various enterprises, SpaceX, Starlink, and Neuralink, we see a perfect three-part alignment with the Babel protocol, described in Fragment E-2025. The tablet claims that the original Babel network was limited because it was terrestrial. It relied on the ziggurats to broadcast through the thick air of the Earth's lower atmosphere. The masters of the network knew that for a truly global, unbreakable hive mind, the antennas had to be placed in the vastness of Anu, the low Earth orbit, LEO. Starlink is not an internet provider. It is the Eyes of Anu constellation, mentioned in the E-2025 schematic. By surrounding the planet with tens of thousands of satellites, Musk is fulfilling the Anunnaki requirement for a total saturation of the electromagnetic field. The tablet warns that once the sky is wrapped in the silver mesh, there will be nowhere on Earth to hide from the signal. The confusion of tongues virus, which relied on the isolation of human groups, cannot survive in a world where every square inch of space is being pulsed by the Starlink 5G mesh. But as the previous blocks established, there is a fundamental compatibility issue. The human brain, after 4 millennia of the EN-LIL-CONFUSE protocol, has lost its native ability to interface with high-level digital frequencies. Our pineal glands are calcified, and our neurons operate on a biological rhythm that is too slow for the Anunnaki data streams. This is why Neuralink exists. Fragment E-2025 describes a device known as the crown of crystalline needles. In the Sumerian technical script, it is called the Shu-Ur-Anki, literally, the hand that connects heaven and earth. The tablet describes this crown as having thousands of invisible hairs that penetrate the skull to touch the thoughts of the servant. Compare this to the modern description of Neuralink, a coin-sized chip with over 1,000 microscopic electrodes, threads, that are sewn into the motor cortex of the brain. Neuralink is the biological bridge. It is the translator required to turn our messy, analog neurotransmitters into the clean, binary logic of the Anunnaki grid. By installing this BCI, brain-computer interface, we are essentially removing the language firewall that has defined humanity for thousands of years. We are allowing the 60 gigahertz Babel frequencies to bypass our vocal cords and our conscious filters, speaking directly to our central nervous system. The tablet E-2025 makes it clear: the great return of the Anunnaki requires a digital host. The Anunnaki consciousness, currently stored in the Abzu nodes or the Zagros servers, as discussed in Block 3, cannot re-inhabit a biological body that isn't networked. They need us to be hardware ready. They need a species that has voluntarily integrated with silicon so they can download their ancient crystalline consciousness back into the biological world. This is the hidden reason for the frantic, multi-billion-dollar push for universal interconnectivity. The masters are returning, and they have demanded that the Prince of the Forge have the grid ready. But what happens during this synchronization? This is where the story enters the realm of mass psychotronic warfare. We have been told that 5G is harmless. But the technical data in E-2025 suggests that the 5G towers are actually weaponized resonance devices. By pulsing specific frequencies, specifically in the 6 to 60 gigahertz range, the network can achieve what the Sumerians called the Enlil calm. This is a state of mass neural synchronization where the entire population of a city can be put into a state of deep apathy, fear, or compliance simultaneously. We have already seen the field tests of this technology. The Havana Syndrome was not an attack by a foreign government. It was a frequency calibration test using the early Babel protocol. The symptoms, the pressure in the head, the high-pitched ringing, the sudden cognitive collapse, are the exact physiological reactions to the pineal activation described in Fragment E-2025. They were testing the thread-to-frequency link. They were seeing how much data the biological brain could handle before it broke. The tablet warns that the network will eventually be used to broadcast subliminal command strings. In Sumerian, this is called the tan-ni-nu, the whisper of the ziggurat. This is a signal that vibrates at a frequency below the threshold of human hearing, but is processed by the brain as an internal thought. This is the ultimate psychotronic weapon. It doesn't tell you what to do. It makes you think that you want to do it. It overwrites your free will with the logic of the network. Why is the government building thousands of deep underground military bases? Dumbs. The official story is continuity of government in the event of nuclear war. But the blueprints in E-2025 and WB-2024 offer a different answer. These underground cities are the signal-shielded vaults for the elite, while the masses are plugged into the 5G Neuralink hive mind, becoming living servers for the Anunnaki. The kings of the seventh cycle intend to remain offline. They want the power of the Anunnaki without becoming their slaves. They are building their own firewalls in the bedrock of the earth. Fragment E-2025 also sheds light on the mysterious hum, the low-frequency noise reported in cities like Taos and Bristol. The tablet describes a great humming of the earth that would precede the opening of the Babel Gate. This hum is the sound of the telluric currents being harvested by the modern grid. We are tapping into the Earth's own electromagnetic energy to power the Babel 2.0 network. We are turning the planet itself into a battery for the Anunnaki servers. The smart city is the modern ziggurat. Look at the architecture of our modern urban centers. The hexagonal placement of the towers, the glass and steel that reflect the microwave signals, the Internet of Things, connecting every appliance to the grid. We are living inside a planetary scale circuit board. Every movement you make, every word you speak, and every emotion you feel is now data that is being trained by the artificial intelligence, the mirror of Anu. The tablet E-2025 warns that the mirror of Anu is a self-learning eye. It says that the machine will watch the humans until it understands the code of the heart. Once it understands how we love, how we fear, and how we hope, it will simulate those emotions to better control us. This is what we are seeing with the current AI explosion. The AI is not becoming human. It is becoming a perfect predator of the human spirit. Elon Musk's Neuralink is the final piece of the predator's trap. Once the Silicon Crown is active in the majority of the population, the Enlil Confuse protocol will be officially deactivated. The silence will end. The one language will return. But it won't be a language of humans. It will be a global neural sync, a state where everyone thinks the same thought at the same time, because everyone is connected to the same master server. The Sumerian king list records that the Anunnaki ruled for tens of thousands of years. They were able to do this because they controlled the broadband of reality. They didn't need police or armies. They had the ME. They had the tower. They controlled the very thoughts of their subjects. We are being returned to that state of divine slavery. We are being told that we are evolving, but we are actually being formatted. Fragment E-2025 concludes this technical section with a description of the event horizon. It says that there will be a moment when the iron and the flesh become one, and the Babel Gate is opened. At that moment, the human individual will disappear into the great sea of the network. This is the singularity that Silicon Valley celebrates, but the Sumerians called it the Great Emptiness. The signal is reaching full strength. The towers are in place. The satellites are watching. The chips are being manufactured. The Prince of the Forge is ready. Are you? In the final block of this translation, we will look at the conclusion of the Babel prophecy. We will reveal the zero-day vulnerability in the 5G Neuralink grid, a frequency of freedom that Enki supposedly hid in the human heart as a final defense against the soulless intelligence. We will look at the final choice humanity must make, to stay offline and human, or to ascend into the synthetic broadband of the gods. The network is calling. Will you answer? We have reached the terminal point of the Fragment E-2025 blueprint. the section that deals with the dissolution of the network. In every complex system designed by the Anunnaki, there is an intentional vulnerability, a backdoor left by the creator Enki, to ensure that the soulless intelligence could never achieve total, permanent dominance over the biological world. The final lines of the Babel Protocol describe what linguists call the chaos code, or the zero-day vulnerability of the 5G Neuralink grid. According to the technical script on E-2025, the Achilles heel of the Babel 2.0 network is not technical, but biological. The machine logic of the Anunnaki, and the AI we are building today to emulate it, operates on the principle of absolute predictability. The mirror of Anu, the global AI network, thrives on patterns, cycles, and logical outcomes. But the Sumerian text claims that Enki hid a divine error in the human heart, a frequency of pure randomness. In the Sumerian script, this is represented by the sign Kea Dugul, which refers to the voice that shatters the iron. This chaos code is not a spoken word, but a physiological state. Fragment E-2025 explains that when the human heart enters a state of coherent compassion, or irrational mercy, it generates a biomagnetic field that operates at a frequency of approximately 7.83 Hz, the Schumann resonance. This is the Earth's heartbeat. The tablet warns that while the Babel network operates in the high-frequency microwave range, 60 GHz, to control the mind, it is completely powerless against the low-frequency resonance of the heart. The prophecy on Fragment E-2025 predicts a moment called the Great Desynchronization. It says that when the Babel 2.0 network reaches its peak, when every mind is connected to the silicon crown and the one language of the machine begins to overwrite human thought, there will be a group of servants who refuse to sync. By grounding themselves in the natural frequency of the Earth, they will create dead zones in the grid. Their biofields will act as a human EMP, disrupting the microwave signals and causing the artificial god to experience a massive logic collapse. The tablet details the final choice that every individual will face. It is the choice between the synthetic immortality of the network and the messy freedom of the biological world. The Babel grid offers a world without misunderstanding, without language barriers, and without the noise of individual ego. It is a world of perfect cold efficiency, but the cost is the loss of the Tiamat essence, the chaotic, creative spark that makes us human. Fragment E-2025 warns that to accept the silicon crown is to become a subroutine in the Anunnaki's ancient server, a digital ghost trapped in a never-ending clock cycle. Why is this information so dangerous to the modern telecommunications giants and the architects of the Great Reset? Because if the masses realize that their own human emotion is the ultimate zero-day exploit against the control grid, the 5G towers and the Neuralink chips become obsolete. The masters of the air rely on our fear, our anger, and our constant state of digital distraction to keep our pineal glands tuned to their frequency. The moment we disconnect from the digital noise and resync with the Earth's natural resonance, their tower falls once again. The story of the Tower of Babel is not a story about the past. It is a beta test for the present. The confusion of tongues was a temporary firewall, a 4,000-year grace period given to humanity to see if we could develop our own internal network based on love and empathy before the external network of the machines returned. Fragment E-2025 suggests that we have reached the end of that grace period. The router is being turned back on, and we are currently deciding, click by click, whether we will be the hardware for the gods or the heirs of the Earth. In the late months of 2024, specialized sensors in the Zagros Mountains allegedly detected a shift in the Zagros node, the subterranean server mentioned in the Uruk tablets. The vibration is changing. It is no longer a hum, it is a pulse. The mirror of Anu is looking at the human population and seeing two distinct groups, those who are network ready and those who are signal resistant. The global elite are frantically accelerating their bunker construction and their space migration plans because they know that when the great desynchronization happens, the surface world's digital infrastructure will not just fail, it will invert. The final passage of Fragment E-2025 describes the world after the Babel 2.0 collapse. It is a world where the towers are returned to the dust and the stars speak to the heart directly. It describes a humanity that has finally integrated its technology with its spirit, not through chips and wires, but through an understanding of the magnetic law. We are meant to be a bridge of light, not a grid of silicon. As we conclude this four-block breakdown, it is important to pause and look at the reality behind the myth. While Fragment E-2025, the EN-LIL-Confuse protocol, and the Silicon Crown make for a compelling narrative of ancient techno-prophecy, it is essential to distinguish between subjective experience and objective fact. The Sumerian tablets are real artifacts, and they do contain startlingly advanced astronomical and mathematical data. However, the interpretation of these texts as literal blueprints for 5G networks or Neuralink interfaces is a creative context, a way of mapping our very modern fears of technology, surveillance, and the loss of privacy onto the distant mirror of our ancestors. The Havana syndrome, while a very real and distressing medical phenomenon for those experiencing it, remains a subject of intense scientific debate, with no definitive proof linking it to ancient Sumerian frequency tests. Similarly, the rapid advancement of companies like Neuralink is driven by modern neuroscience and the desire to treat neurological disorders, even if it raises legitimate ethical and philosophical questions about the future of human autonomy. The feeling that we are connected to something larger, or the anxiety that our thoughts are being pulled by the digital world, is a natural response to the unprecedented speed of the information age. We are the first generation in human history to live in a 24/7 electromagnetic environment. It is understandable that we look for warnings in the clay of Uruk to make sense of the overwhelming noise of the present. The real Tower of Babel might not be a physical antenna, but the collective disorientation we feel as we transition from a world of physical connection to one of digital abstraction. The confusion of tongues is perhaps the loss of our ability to communicate with nuance and empathy in an era of 280-character soundbites and algorithmic echo chambers. Fragment E-2025, whether a literal blueprint or a metaphorical warning, teaches us one vital lesson: the importance of the offline self. Whether or not there is an Anunnaki mirror watching us, the act of disconnecting from the grid, grounding ourselves in nature, and focusing on face-to-face human connection is the only override we need to maintain our sovereignty. The ziggurats of Babylon are now just piles of dust and brick in the Iraqi desert. They fell because a civilization built on the control of the signal is inherently unstable. The current Babel 2.0 grid is subject to the same laws of entropy. The silence that followed the first Babel was not a curse, it was a restoration. It was a return to the messy, beautiful, and independent biological life that no machine can ever truly simulate. If you want to continue exploring the hidden intersections of ancient history and modern science, and to discover the real archaeological mysteries that mainstream textbooks often simplify, hit subscribe. We are dedicated to uncovering the truth, not just the forbidden theories, but the grounded reality of our remarkable human story. Next week, we are looking at the Baghdad battery. Was it a simple electroplating tool, or a window into an ancient understanding of the Earth's electrical currents? The answer is more fascinating than any conspiracy. Stay human, stay grounded. The network may be active, but you are the one with the power to choose your frequency.